Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Credit Chat. I'm Rod Griffin, Senior Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. I'm here to answer your questions about credit reporting and credit scoring and fraud and ID theft, all of those things that affect you every day and me as well, because I have a credit report also. So want to help answer your questions. Ms. ZD4, great to see you. New York Zeppelin, thanks for joining and being part of the chat today. If you have questions, please ask. I try to be here Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern, to have a dialogue and a conversation about what's important to you, what you need help with, what you're trying to understand. So if you have a question, I know others do, and the whole objective is to help people share information with one another so you can make right decisions for you and have a better, more successful financial life. So please feel free to ask any questions you have. I'll do my very best to answer. I am Stephen Martin. I'm Senior Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian, which is one of the, what they think we all think of as one of the big three credit reporting companies. But I'm actually based in the Dallas area. Our U.S. headquarters are in Costa Mesa, California. So, but I'm in the Dallas area, where we have a consumer assistance call center and our data centers and those sorts of things. So I'm from U.S., from North America, Experian North America, if that's helpful. So I can't speak to credit reporting or credit scoring issues in other countries. But if you're asking about things in the U.S., in North America, I may be able to help. I have a counterpart in the UK. I keep telling he needs to get on Periscope, but he's not there yet. So, so James Jones, if you're listening, and I know he does once in a while, he popped in a couple of weeks ago. But jump in. It's a great way to have a dialogue, great way to share information, and to really help me and my company understand what is of concern to you, what we're doing that's working well, what maybe we can help with and do a better job of. So all of those things. Chicago Gangsters, thanks for joining. Brad Cash now, thanks for being here. Good to see you. Future ICU Nurse 84. What do they mean by closed accounts? So a closed account, when you get your credit report, if you look at it and the account says closed, closed usually refers to a credit card, or what you might hear the term revolving account, because you can carry a balance from one month to another, or revolve a balance. So if you have a credit card and you notify the lender that you no longer want it to be available to make charges and you pay off the balance, they will report that account as closed. That means it's no longer able to be used. So it's closed, no longer active, and so you can't make additional charges with it. So it's just it's a closed account. Exactly what it sounds like. If you have an installment loan for something like a car, for example, or you get a small loan from a store to maybe buy a couch, something like that, or buy furniture, and you have a specific principal amount they loan you, and your agreement is you'll pay a certain amount each month until it's paid off. The installment loans will be reported as paid once they're paid off, usually not reported as closed, because you have a payment period, a certain amount you pay each month, and once it's paid, it's paid. With a revolving account, because you can make charges and you have a credit limit you can charge to, and you're making those decisions, it's closed to additional charges. So that's what that means. So they kind of refer to the same thing, an account that's no longer active or open in your credit history. So it would still be there, but with a status of closed. Big Mofo Show, thanks for joining. Whoops, I turned the camera around. Sorry about that. Kilo 3000, thanks for joining. Future ICU student loans. Yeah, so student loan debts. So if a student loan account, they may report it as closed. They may also be reported as paid. It's a form of installment loan. Student loans are unique in that they can have other kinds of what we call loan status or payment status. So they could be in deferment, they could be in forbearance. So in different status statements, or different kinds of status for that account, or repayment status. And so if it's in deferment, you're not making payments, but you will at some point. Same thing with forbearance. Paid or closed means that account's no longer open, no longer active. And so that's usually a good thing unless it's defaulted, in which case it could be shown as charged off, or closed would say transferred or sold potentially to another lender or a collection agency. So look at that status. That shows the history of that account. from its beginning to its end in the credit history. So that's what it's about. Just paid my self-lender account. Will it still report the credit report? So Chicago gangsters, said that wrong, gangstas. That's the, what will happen is that if that account's being reported, it would be open, probably say open current, never late. We hope that's the ideal status until it's paid off. It would then be reported as paid. So it doesn't go away right away when you pay something off. It remains part of that credit history. We will keep a paid account that's been open. Rephrase that, I'm going to confuse you, everybody. We will keep an account that's reported as paid, so paid in full, for 10 years from the pay date if there's no negative information in the history. So you don't lose that good payment history when you pay it off. It stays in the report. It's no longer open. We're no longer active, but we keep the good stuff longer than the bad stuff is kind of the way I look at it. If you have a late payment, that falls off after 7 years. An account that's charged off as a loss, for example, sold to collections, those stay 7 years from the original delinquency date. So they fall off sooner. So if you pay an account in full, that's a positive thing. We're going to keep that information longer. Jay Truth, thanks for joining. Our credit service is right that says credit file thin, get a secured credit card. So Apostolic Wisconsin, or WI, I'm presuming that's what that stands for. When you have a thin credit file, what that means is that usually you have a credit history that's very short. By our definition, usually less than 5 accounts, or perhaps just a very short period of time, or both. So a thin credit file is kind of what it describes. It's very thin. If you have a thick credit file, you have a long credit history, multiple accounts. If you print it out, excuse me, my voice has been kind of weird lately too. I'm trying to lose it. But if you have a thick file, you have a long credit history, it might take several pages to print. If you have a thin file, it might not. So it's kind of like what it describes. So a thin file, short credit history, and so that's true. If you have a thin credit file, your scores usually aren't quite as strong, but getting a secured account can help you add to that credit history. So a secured account is an account where you deposit funds into a savings account with a bank or a credit union, and they issue you a credit card that you can then make charges with, just like any other credit card, but it's tied to that savings account. If you do not pay on time or repay those debts, those charges you make, they can take the money out of the savings account to cover their losses, but they would still report the account as late to your credit report. So it's really important that you use that card well. It's a good way to get your foot in the door. When you say secured account, it's not about you being secured. It's about the bank being secured. The account is, the bank is secured because they can take money out of that savings account and secure them or protect them from losses if you misuse the account. So it's a good starting tool. It's also good that if you use it well, you not only establish credit history, but you also start a savings account. And so that can be positive as well. It's kind of a 2-for-1 deal. You get savings established and you have a credit card, you start building a credit history. So yes, it can be a great tool. There are other ways if you have a thin file to help improve that credit history. If you're renting, talk to your landlord. They can report your positive rent payments, see if they will do that. You can search Experian rent reporting and find a website that explains how we do that and how your landlord can do that. You can also enroll in Experian Boost. I know a lot of you are familiar with that. If you're not, it's a tool from Experian, almost a year old now, that lets you enroll in a service with Experian that enables us to report your positive cell phone payments, your positive utility payments, so things like natural gas, water, electricity, to your credit report, and you get credit for those things. You get positive information out of your credit report. And we do that by getting your permission to access the savings account or checking account. You make those utility payments through each month, and we capture that payment and pull it into the report as a positive account. So if you have a cell phone, you could have one account. If you have an electric bill, that could be another account. If you have a natural gas bill, that could be another account. If you have a cable television bill, that could be another one. So it's not all one. It's each of those things is a potential positive account in your credit history. What we're seeing is that people who enroll, 2 out of 3 people see an increase in their scores. When they do see an increase, the average is about 13 points. And back to the thin file, with people who have thin files, we're seeing an average score increase of 19 points with Experian Boost. And it's free. It's all permission based. So if you change your mind, don't want to do it, you can tell us. We'll take that information out of the report. We won't go collect the information anymore. So it gives you control as well. So that's very new in our industry, to actually say, to people, you can tell us what to put in a report, and you can tell us you don't want to do it anymore. So it gives you complete control. So check that out. That can help build a history and help you start moving forward in terms of credit scores as well. Jetties, lots of sevens. If in deferment, does that affect your credit score? It may not. It depends on the scoring system, depends on the lender. If a student loan is in deferment, and I'm presuming student loan, that's usually what it refers to. Mine were there at one point. So I went through deferment and forbearance and consolidation. I did everything I could to make sure I got my student loans paid. It took a while, but I got it done. So hang in there. Been there, done that, know how that feels. But if you're in deferment, it's a repayment status. So it's not actively in repayment. So it may or may not affect the scores that are used. Once it goes into an active repayment status and is reported with a status of in repayment, it will then affect your scores for sure. So it just depends on the lender and the scoring system that's being used. Are credit services right? Say thin credit file, get a secured card to increase credit score. Yeah. So and that having that secured account will add to your credit history, and having a positive history is an account in your credit report is the first step in building credit scores. The other thing I would add is that credit scoring systems need to see, in most cases, 3 to 6 months of activity with the account before it's included in the score. So if you open a secured account, you may not see an immediate impact on your score because it's establishing a history. You need to show that you're active with that account, that you're paying it on time, and after several months, it will begin to affect those scores. In some cases, with Vantage Score, for example, they say that they can have an account begin to affect scores within a month, or after a month, so a little bit faster. So it just depends on the scoring. Again, it's the scoring system used and the lender. With Experian Boost, we actually go back up to 24 months with the accounts you ask us to add, and add that positive information. So you could have 2 years of history right away with those accounts. When you apply for New York Zeppelin, when you apply for a car, banks pull 3 scores from the 3 bureaus. Which score is used? You're going to hear this a lot. It depends. That's kind of the answer to everything. Usually they'll pull the middle score or use the middle score, but they'll pull reports from each of the 3 credit reporting companies. And actually what happens when you go to a car dealership, and I just bought a car for the first time in 6 years. So went through that last week, as a matter of fact. And so when you go to a dealership, you shop for a car, they're going to do something called shotgunning. If you say, you tell them I want to use your financing process, right? So they will then take your application information, send it to multiple lenders that they work with. So shotgun it out, and they will come back then with the best terms or rates that they can find for you. So that's actually a good thing to do if you're financing through the dealer. Also recommend that you get pre-approved if you can through your lender, your bank, or your credit union. They may offer better rates. Also let you know what the dealership needs to be looking for. It gives you information, and information is power. When you know what you'll qualify for, if the lender comes back with a higher interest rate, you can tell them, no, thank you. I have a better rate. We're going to use my financing, or they'll work harder to get that better rate for you. They may even give you a lower price if you finance through them. So you use all of the information you have to get the best terms and rates. But when they do that, there will be an inquiry for each of those lenders that they went to on your credit report. You don't have to worry about that. Inquiries for auto lending purposes, for car lending purposes, only count as one inquiry or not at all. Again, depending on the score that's used. Older scoring systems will count them as only one inquiry. The newer systems will ignore them completely in many cases. So you don't have to worry about shopping for the best rates. So always recommend you do that. Same thing's true with mortgage lending and often with other kinds of lending today. So don't worry about those inquiries. They'll be there so you have a complete record on your credit report of who's looked at it, but the scoring systems recognize them as inquiries for auto lending purposes, and so we'll only count them as one inquiry or not at all. And so shop for the best rates. Don't worry about those inquiries, but they will usually, the lenders will get your reports from all 3 credit reporting companies. They'll get scores for each of those reports. So you get 3 reports, they'll get 3 scores. They may use the same scoring system. It's probably like a FICO auto score, it could be a FICO 8, could be a FICO 9, could be, a FICO. There's lots of different FICO scores specifically for auto lending in most cases, and so they'll get scores and reports. They usually look at the middle score as kind of the one they'll use. So so usually they're not terribly far apart either, unless there's something really weird about the reports, which is very unusual. Usually the information is the same or very nearly the same. The scores may be a few points different, and they'll take the middle score for that reason. Coach Reed, thanks for joining. Apostolic, Wisconsin, thank you. I mean, that's the whole point, is to help share information that you need and to give you the information you can act on. I always tell people, I've been with Experian almost 23 years, so worked in the corporate world. I can do death by PowerPoint as well as anybody. I'd rather not do that. I want to answer your questions because that's going to empower you and help you get to what you need to know. So that's what we're really about. I have a problem with Experian Boost. Melanie Monod, I'm not very good with French, but not sure. Mexican for Trump, U.S. I don't know if you're referring to the bank itself. Sorry, feel that way. Tina LaRoe, Christina Rowan, thanks for joining. Good to see you. Then she works for me, so I'm glad to see her here. And when Bernie cancels all student debt, will credit scores go up? Not a political platform, so can't speak to that. And I'll let you guys worry about the politics here. And Comment King, that's kind of funny. Is mayonnaise good for a credit score? Depends on if you're charging it. If you're going to the grocery store charging a lot of to pay for a lot of mayonnaise and your balances on your credit cards go up, not good for your credit score. If you're just buying a little mayonnaise and paying it in full, you're probably okay. Not going to hurt you. Jacori, thanks for joining and being part of the chat. And for joining in. If you have questions, let us know. We'll do our best to answer. Meg King, when you apply for instant credit at a department store and you have your lock on your Experian credit, you still get approved. Not initially. So what they will do is come back to you and say, we can't access your report. You need to remove the lock. And then with the Experian app, you can go in, push the button, unlock your report, and then they can proceed with the application. So, and that's really the intent. And, with a lock or a credit freeze, which are similar but two different things. But if you have a frozen credit file, you need to lift that freeze by providing a PIN number in advance. If you have a lock in place through an Experian's app, for example, you need to remove the lock so that they can access that report. And until they can do that, they may not be able to. They won't be able to process your application because they need to see that credit history. So that's one of the challenges with having a lock or a freeze, especially if you don't apply for credit very often. You have to remember to remove it. And if you go and apply and you forget to remove it, they'll come back to you and say, hey, you need to do that for us. But you won't get approved instantly if there's a freeze or a lock in place. They'll need to go back and have it removed. Hirschberger 1, good to see you. Thanks for joining. Big Mofo Show. It says late payments for my student loans on my laptop and from my Experian app shows on time. Not sure when you send your laptop, which monitoring service you might be accessing. And so probably not the same, or maybe a different report. So it could be a report from Equifax as opposed to Experian, or TransUnion as opposed to Experian. But and if it is a different report, they may not have the update information yet. So that could be the case. Be sure that you're looking at a current report from the same source, and it should be the same. If it's from a different source, from Equifax or TransUnion, for example, you might see something different. They may not report those accounts, or they may not update them at the same time. So you can see a difference in that regard. It kind of goes back to the question about which score do auto lenders use, and if there are differences in the number, what causes them. It can be a matter of timing. They may have updated with Experian, but not yet updated with the other credit reporting companies. So they may result in a bit of a different score. So another thing to be aware of. New York Zeppelin. I have a FICO 8 score 797 with Experian. Is it worth it for me to use Boost? I'm concerned about Boost security. With a 797, you're in really good shape. Yeah, that's the first thing I would say is that you're doing the right things. Your scores are sound. You're probably going to be able to qualify for any credit you apply for. Experian Boost may help a little bit. I've talked to people who've had scores above 750 who say they see, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 points increase. Not a whole lot, but it's a choice that you might. That's up to you, really. With a score in that range, you're in really good shape. Experian Boost, what we've found is that it's most effective for people who have thin credit files or have credit scores of 680 or below, because they're building their history, and that kind of information is going to be most useful to them. Doesn't mean that using Boost won't help, but in terms of a score like yours, you're not going to see, or at least you're not likely to see much change as a result. But it's something you certainly can do if you choose to. So I'll leave that one to you. But you're doing the right things. Dwight, 1989. What kind of rates do you get for being a first-time home buyer? That's really a question for a mortgage lender. So visit your bank, contact a mortgage lender. They have different programs for first-time buyers depending on your background, your credit history. They make those decisions with regard to your overall financial situation. Experian, the credit reporting companies, do not decide who qualifies, if you're approved or if you're declined. If you have good credit or bad, we provide a credit report so that lenders can look at that information and they make that determination based on their particular risk tolerance, their particular lending needs, their customer base, those sorts of things. So we're a source of information to help them make those decisions. It's not the only consideration that goes into making an approval decision, or an application decision. Check with like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac as well. They are the government-sponsored entities, GSEs, that set secondary market buying requirements for mortgage loans. So if a lender or a mortgage loan originator, you apply with them, they originate the loan, say you're approved, they then will sell that loan to Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Excuse me. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac say, here are the requirements for us to buy that from you. So they kind of dictate what that's going to be. They may have more information about what kind of rates you would qualify for as a first-time home buyer, what kinds of options are available to you. So check with them, and search the web. I mean, there are lots of good sources around first-time home buyer programs. So, check with lenders, check with Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and maybe things like FHA, HUD. Some of those organizations may have information as well that will give you a better sense of the programs that are available to you. Gamer, I'm probably saying that wrong, 62138. Thanks for joining. Lola Bunny, welcome and good to see you. Lolo Bunny, is there a way to remove a house from your credit report if the account was closed? You can't remove it likely. It will be reported with the status of that mortgage payment. So it may be reported as paid, it may be reported as current, but in repayment. If there are challenges with it could be reported as delinquent. But as long as it's going to be there, if it's reported paid and it's never been late, it's going to stay for 10 years from the pay date, which is a good thing. If there are delinquencies, those late payments will come off 7 years from the original delinquency date. If you are a joint holder or co-signer for that mortgage, it's probably going to stay on the report. The lender would have to tell us to take it off. So you'd have to go to them. They'd have to agree to remove you from that mortgage agreement, that contract. And if they did, in that case, they could remove it from the report because you're no longer responsible for that debt. But it's up to the lender to do that. That's a common challenge with divorce proceedings, because the divorce decree will say, I'm not responsible, but my ex-spouse is. The problem is the divorce decree does not break the contracts with the lenders. That the divorce decree is just an agreement between you and the court. So you have to go to the lender. They have to agree to change that contract. They may not. So it's up to them to do that. Does credit card services link to Experian? Norden IAFC. I'm not sure I understand the question fully. We have a service that can help match you to the credit cards that are aligned with what you tell us you're looking for. So if you come to Experian, you go to our website and or enroll in our app or monitoring service, we have a credit card matching service. And if you tell us, I'm looking for a credit card that offers discounts on purchases or cashback or airline miles that has a certain interest rate, no annual fee, and so on, we will take the information you provide us and match you to the cards that most closely meet the requirements you're telling us you need. But I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. Dwight, you're very much, that's why I'm here, to help answer your question. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Time flies. I can't believe how fast these conversations go. And I'm always happy I enjoy this immensely. So trying to read. I have home address that is not true to report it, but it's still there. Please advise. So if you have, so if we're talking about an address, not like a mortgage loan, but an address, it's an identifier that's been associated with you in some way. The first thing I always recommend is that you make sure you don't recognize the address. So is it an address that's tied to an account you have? Perhaps it's someone else's address that's a joint holder with you or that you co-signed with. In that case, it's just an identifier that says there's an account you're tied to and this address belongs to it. Addresses do not affect lending decisions. They do not affect credit scores in any way. So you don't have to worry about that. But they're identifiers that help us to know who you are and how it match to you. So if you've never lived there, it's not an address you recognize. It's not like a transposed digit. So if your address is 1234 Oak Street, but it says 1324 Oak Street, that's something we can help you identify the lender and get that corrected in their records so it's reported correctly. Probably not an indicator of fraud. In some cases, there are addresses that you don't recognize at all, don't belong to you, never lived there, don't know anybody who it belonged to. It could be a sign of fraud, especially if there's other information like names you don't recognize, social security numbers that don't belong to you, or accounts that pop up that don't belong to you. In that case, I'd worry about it from a fraud perspective, dispute, and we can help you dispute it as fraudulent. To dispute information, just go to Experian.com/fraud. And you can add a fraud alert. We can send you a free report, and you can go through that dispute process, or you go to Experian.com/dispute. It'll give you a free report. You can dispute the information. So, not sure there exactly what's going on, but look for some of those things. I hope that's helpful. How would you get the negative off of your report? So, Ja'Cory, patience. If it's accurate, it's going to be there. Typically for 7 years from the date of the missed payment. So if you have a late payment, that's going to stay there for 7 years. If you have an account, you fell behind, never caught up, charged off as a loss, goes to collections. That original debt and the collection account will be deleted at the same time. So 7 years from the date it first became late, what we call the original delinquency date. In the meantime, if you can catch up on those late payments, continue to pay on time, the further in the past that the late payments occurred, the less effect they have on credit scores. So catching up, making those on-time payments is going to help. If you have a collection account, you can pay it off. That can help if it's accurate. You have accurately reported to us that it is in fact a collection account. So usually, if the information is accurate, it's going to be a matter of time more than anything. The Federal Trade Commission said you cannot remove accurate information from your report prior to the timeframes that are specified in the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So that's kind of the catch. But the further in the past things occur, the less effect they have. The other thing to know about is that there have been a lot of changes in the last few years around credit reporting and scoring, in that, for example, even if a collection account is on your report, if it's shown as paid, the newest credit scoring systems from FICO and VantageScore will exclude them from the score. So if you pay a collection account, they won't be used to calculate the score. It can improve your score right away. So paying off a collection account, even if the negative information is there, is going to help right away. So one thing to keep in mind, medical collections are treated differently now. They don't weigh as heavily. Paid medical collections don't get included in scores, in the new scores. So there have been some changes in that regard too. So even though it's there, it's effectively gone if you pay off that collection account with the newest scoring systems. If you pay your collection, would that improve my score right away? Yeah, so just got to that. Blessed 120499, way to be ahead of me. But I got there. Someone you know stole your mom's social security number and bought a house. You know the person. Huge challenge, and also one of the things that's common to the majority of identity theft. You usually know who the identity thief is, sadly. And often it's friends or family. So if the account's fraudulent and they've stolen the social security number, there's clearly fraud and identity theft, you can file a police report, provide that police report to Experian. When you go to dispute the information, go to experian.com/dispute, and your mom would have to do it's her information, and would be her report. Disputed as fraudulent. We'll be able to start to suppress that information, remove it from the report. The challenge is, do you file a police report and file charges against someone you know, and that makes it really hard. So that's part of the challenge. At the same time, I would add what we call an initial security alert to her report. So if you go to experian.com/fraud, an initial security alert lasts for 12 months. It says, I believe I may be a victim of identity theft. Before granting credit, my name, verify my identity, or call me, and you can provide a telephone number. And that way you can get a report, see what's there. If you file that police report, you can add an extended victim statement that stays for 7 years on the report. It says, I am a victim of identity theft. Before granting credit, my name, call me. And so it provides that additional protection. So 2 steps, completely free. It helps protect that report from further misuse of her identity and her stolen identity. In the meantime, it also notify that lender that it's fraudulent. And if you have that police report, they're going to ask for that. That might help in resolving that issue as well. Crackerman 38, thanks for joining. Another state, no ties at all, just don't know where or from. I will call it in. So yeah, if it's it's in a different state, you can still file a police report at your local police department. You don't have to go to other state if the fraud occurred somewhere else. You may need to be where your mother lives, because she's the victim in this case, because it's her identity that's stolen. But you go to a local police department. I actually had that happen once. So, and my little town in Texas knew exactly what I was talking about. The officer said, just a minute, let me get the fraud report form, and pulled it out and did everything. So they will know exactly what you're talking about when you go in and say, hey, I'm a victim of identity theft. My mom's a victim of identity theft. Police need to file a report. They should know right away exactly what to do. How do you make $1 million a year? I don't know, because I don't make that much money a year. You have to work hard and be smart about intelligent, be thoughtful about how you manage your money, and do something useful and productive to society that can help as well. Debt is in collection. Should I pay the balance or use the discounted resolution offer they gave me? If you pay the balance, that's going to look best in your credit report if that account's still reported. So, if you resolve or pay what you're saying, a discounted resolution, what they're talking about is a settlement. And so the account will be reported as settled in your credit report. Settled is negative. It means you didn't pay the balance in full as agreed. So anytime an account's reported as settled, it's going to hurt your scores. But sometimes it's the right thing to do if you can't afford to pay off that account. But that will help you get your feet back on the ground and get back control of your finances again over time. It's going to take longer to restore that history and restore your finances, but it will get you in the right track. Maybe it's the right thing. Talk to a good credit counseling service that's looking at your overall financial situation too. They're great nonprofit, no cost counseling services around the country. I know the folks at nfcc.org, National Foundation for Credit Counseling, great place to start. There are other good ones as well. But find a good nonprofit counselor and they can give you some broader advice. Always caution, and I don't know what the situation is in your case. You might be working with somebody who's really fabulous. But I know people who, go to organizations that want lots of money and say, we'll settle your accounts, but they don't offer them any other advice. Don't look at their financial situation and don't give them a sense of what might be better for them. Or maybe there's other solutions to the issues to help them move forward. So always find somebody who's not going to just say, here's the easy way out, or we can settle those accounts, just pay us and it's gone, because it won't be gone. It's still going to be on your report. But if you go to a good counseling service, they'll say, let's look at your financial situation, look at your assets, look at your income, look at your credit history, look at your debts, and let's figure out how we work within what you have and then maybe work with your lenders to negotiate as well if that's necessary. So find somebody who's going to give a holistic view. So it shows up on her credit report. She's trying to buy a new home. Well, this cause an issue. It could, if she already has a mortgage loan. That's a huge debt. I don't know if it's being paid on time. If it's delinquent, late, being reported as delinquent, that's going to make it hard, probably to qualify for a new mortgage as well. So if it's fraudulent, you need to address it as fraudulent. And I know that's hard especially when you know the person. Muhammad 844172220. Why is it that there's a certain bank that's not on Boost? We're constantly adding new banks. Some are not. I can tell you when I first tried to Boost, my bank wasn't there either, with a small regional bank, local bank, and they weren't on the list yet either. So I had that experience, but we're constantly adding. It's likely they're just not on the list yet of banks that are included. That's my best guess. Ms. ED4, thanks. Always good to see you, and glad I'm providing information that's helpful. That's what it's really all about, and appreciate everybody joining. If you're just joining, I'm Rod Griffin, Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. This is Credit Chat, and I try to be here Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern, to answer your questions about fraud and identity theft, credit reports, credit scores, all those things that are important to your financial health and well-being, and help you make better decisions based on what you need to know. So thanks for being here. I truly appreciate it. Jacory, does pay for delete work? I will say this. My view is that the credit history should be accurate. So if you pay for an account, it should be reported as paid and show that in the report. That's what the FCRA says. Will it work? You can always ask. And so I would leave it at that. In the process of going through a DMP, would this cause an issue with me buying your first home? So the fact that you're in a DMP in and of itself won't affect scores. So there'd be a statement potentially that says the account's being paid through a debt management plan or through credit counseling. That statement doesn't affect scores. What will affect the scores would be if the account's reported as settled. So the account payment status is changed to report settled for less than originally agreed. That status will affect scores, as would any delinquency or repayment issues in the history of that account. That's what's going to be important. But going through a counseling process or even entering into a DMP itself won't necessarily. It's how that DMP is then reported that's going to affect the scores. How often does Boost update? The last one was the 7th. So about once a month. So every month, depending on when you enroll, when that's reported, and when we access, it's typically once a month is how often we would update the account information, just like any other account information in a credit report. For the COP 91, also good. Thanks. Good to see you. And thanks for joining. Are we doing something with Experian? I don't know. I'll have to check. If we are, I'm not familiar with that. Saying that, what should I do once I've completed the payment program? So make sure it's reported as, back to the DMP, make sure that it's reported as completed and that the status is accurate. So if you completed the DMP, that management plan, it should show that it's paid or settled for less than originally agreed. The status is accurate with that account and that the payment history is accurate. It may not be what you want to see. It could be, if there were delinquencies, things prior, as I said, those would still show. But make sure the status is reported correctly, that it's updated in the report. Usually when you complete a program or you pay something off, I recommend giving it 30 to 45 days after so that there's time for it to be updated in the report. That doesn't always happen right away. It's typically updated at the end of the billing cycle. So that could be just a couple of days. It could be up to 30 days if you paid it off right at the beginning of that cycle. So give it a little time, then check your report. Make sure everything is accurate in terms of the status, the payment history, and so on. And it should happen automatically. So that should do it. So thank you all for joining and for great conversation today and dialogue today. If you're just joining, I am about to sign off. I'm Rod Griffin, Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. This is Credit Chat. Try to be here Tuesdays and Thursdays, 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern, to answer your questions about credit reporting, credit scoring, fraud ID theft, all those things that are important. I'll answer one more question, but also want to say join us on Wednesdays, 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern on Twitter. We are going to have a great conversation about how do you communicate about finances in a relationship. That's always a fun thing to do sometimes. So, and we want to make it a better conversation, not just an argument. So we're going to have a great conversation, have some great experts joining us. So join us tomorrow, 2 o'clock Central, 3 Eastern on Twitter for Credit Chat. You can learn more about this Periscope and our Credit Chat at ex.pn/Credit Chat. And one more, would it say settled though completed, or would this be something I need to do? It would update automatically. The lenders will update the status to show settled or paid settled or settled for less than originally agreed. You would see that language with the account. That should happen automatically. So you shouldn't have to do anything, but check the report. If it's not reported that way after a billing cycle, maybe say 30 to 45 days, check your report and make sure it's reported that way. If it's not, you can dispute it. There's no cost to dispute. You'll have a current report and you'll be able to dispute it. We'll go back to source, make sure that status is reported accurately. So thank you all for all the great questions and being part of the chat today. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow on Twitter. And on Thursday, I plan to be here as well, 1:30 Central, 2:30 Eastern. I'll talk to you all very soon. Take care, everybody.